Hello and welcome to this video, and this video is going to be called Can Prog Still Court Controversy? Or I might just say the statement, Prog can still cause controversy with an exclamation mark at the end. This really, for fans of prog, is probably the biggest story around a progressive rock artist that has happened for the last 20 years. And I've been avoiding talking about it, but it seems so obvious on this channel where we talk about all things proggy that I should at least say my opinion. That's if I'm still allowed to say my opinion. Do we still live in a world where somebody can have an opinion about something? Or do we live in the world where when someone states their opinion, right or wrong, that they have to be shut down and shut up so that the people, the stupid people out there, won't get affected by this evil opinion? You know, are there really these people of such high moral standing that they can judge that from their absolute position of moral authority what people should and should not say, but even worse, what artists should and should not do in a concert? Now, the reason why Roger Waters is courting so much controversy is that governments at the moment, like the German government, have cancelled one of his shows. They've shut it down. They didn't think that it was suitable for us, right? We can't go and see something like that. It would be wrong. Now, this is driven by the accusation that Roger Waters is an anti-Semite. I was just reading the Independent newspaper before I came on to do this video, and both Michael Gove and Keir Starmer have stated that they think Roger Waters is an anti-Semite, and they're welcome to do that. They're entitled for that opinion to be voiced, and Roger Waters is entitled to counter that opinion, which he has done. He's produced a video which I watched last night where he's stated his case. And when I watched that video, I thought I need to come on and talk about this, and I need to talk about it from the progressive rock angle, all right? Because I think it points to something about rock music, and specifically the rock music that I grew up with, that you grew up with, right? And certain values that we hold that is inherent in rock music. It's a challenge to that, I think, right? And it shows for me that if we go back to progressive rock in its early days, and we look at bands like Pink Floyd, and we look at bands like Soft Machine, King Crimson, all those bands were innovative, and they were striking, and they were, right at the start, countercultural in a way. They were pushing the expectations. And part of that was because they stopped singing about love and partying, and they started to sing about all sorts of different subjects, often fantasy subjects, often spiritual subjects, but in Pink Floyd's case, political subjects, which really starts with Dark Side of the Moon. Now, Dark Side of the Moon is one of the biggest albums in history. You know, Pink Floyd are one of the biggest selling rock acts of all time, and Roger Waters has amassed a huge fortune, and he's able to put on shows of such magnitude that anyone who's seen the videos of this tour he's doing at the moment, it's absolutely incredible. It's a multimedia event. It's not just a rock band on stage playing, it's a full conceptual show. It has all the tropes of progressive rock, and it's about things, it's about politics, right? Now, Roger Waters is very, very left-leaning. His parents were communists. His dad died when he was a baby, fighting against the Nazis at Anzio, right? He was brought up in a very political household. And we see that left-wing politics emerge in Pink Floyd, right? Now, I am not particularly left-wing. Anybody who really studies this channel will know that I'm not. So I don't necessarily agree with a lot of what Roger Waters said, but I want to hear what he's saying. I want to hear his opinion, and I want to be able to change my opinion based upon what he says. When I hear him talk, some of it I agree with him, some of it I don't, and I take the stuff I agree with and I adapt my opinion based upon what he's saying. And I really believe that is the role of the artist. The artist talks about aesthetics, and aesthetics is the place where our morals and ethics are born, right? When we make a moral statement, we are making a quality statement about the world, and that is basically on what we like and what we don't like. But morals are different to our individuals' likes in that they're a collective like. Humanity has created these sort of collective dislikes and likes, and that is negotiated in the space of art. If you strangle that freedom for artists to express that and put their case across, you strangle the developments of higher moral code. In other words, a moral code that is being put under question and refined. You know, throughout humanity, you know, and you've got to remember, we started off on this earth basically just fighting for our lives, fighting for survival and fighting everybody else. And through human history, we have developed a moral code, and that has been fine-tuned. All the things that I hold dear, you know, the fact that, you know, people have human rights, you know, the fact that we don't agree with slavery, at least here in Western democracy. All those things that we hold dear have been negotiated, and those things don't start with the politicians, and it doesn't even start with the philosophers, it starts with the artists. If we look at the Enlightenment, which is the great blossoming of these ideas about 200-300 years ago, that has its roots in the Renaissance. And the Renaissance was an artistic movement, artistic movement that pointed back to Greek ideas of democracy, of science, of rationality, maths, and all those types of things, right? Those things being brought back in, mixed with the sort of Christian theology, those two things together create the Enlightenment. So I think this is a really important thing to say, right? So if we are starting from that position, right, if you agree with that artists need to be able to say what they're going to say. If they say something that the world doesn't agree with, the world will stand up and say this is terrible, you know, and they should not try and close that down. They should not try and ban it. The great era of rock music emerged in the 1960s, and that was a period where people wanted to give whoever you were, regardless of what identity group you belonged to, they wanted to give you equal rights. They wanted to treat everybody as a human, not as a this group or that group or this group or that group, right? And in doing that, it opened up certain voices that hadn't been heard before. And in the 1960s, there was this big burgeoning amongst the arts, not just in pop music, but right across the arts. In film changed, books change, art changes, music changes. And what we see is because the world had opened up to these different voices, those different voices would be able to say new things and innovate new ideas, right? Now, on this channel, I'll often point the finger as 1962 as the year where that changed. In 1962 here in the UK, Lady Chatterley's Lover, which was a book by D.H. Lawrence that contained sexual material, that book had been banned for many years, and there was a court case, and that was overturned, and the culture changed. It went in a certain direction. It said, we have no right to stop this, that human beings have a right to be able to see this. There's not a hierarchy of people where some people are arbiters and they can say what people should see and what they shouldn't see. That was opened up, and everyone was allowed to then read D.H. Lawrence, you know, Lady Chatterley's Lover. A few years later, we have a sexual revolution in the 1960s. That has positive things, without a doubt. It has negative things. Those things were negotiated. You know, artists that could see the limits of the sexual revolution are able then to make pieces of art which question that, right? I think this is a really, really important thing that happens. And you have to understand that when this was happening in the 1960s, the powers that be, it was a massive challenge to their dogma that they lived by. That cultural shift that happened because rock artists, if we just pick them, especially the ones out of the folk rock era, those especially, but also aesthetically, progressive rock artists, heavy metal artists, all those artists in the late 60s were challenging the status quo. They were against the powers that be. The powers that be did not agree with what they were claiming as being something that is good, you know. An example of this would be the adoption of old blues songs into rock music, because a lot of those blues songs are singing about subject matter which is quite troublesome, okay? And that idea goes into rock music, and rock music has this smell of countercultural rebellion. You know, that's what we like about rock music. These things, as time has come on, have become almost like dogmas, right? The values that were established in that great period of the 1960s have now become ideological, they're dogmatic, and the powers that be have aligned themselves with those dogmas now, all right? And one of the dogmas, which is a hangover from the Second World War, is this idea of anti-Semitism, all right? And so I feel that sometimes this is one of the claims that is thrown at people to try and shut them up. Now, the big question here, and I'm not going to get into this on this video, I might do though, I never know, but I'm going to try not to. The big question is whether Roger Waters' criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. If he criticises that country's approach, if he says that they're, running an apartheid, is he criticising Jewish people when he does that? Now, a few years back, Desmond Tutu said exactly the same thing. Desmond Tutu was a great character that had fought against apartheid in South Africa, and he actually stated that he thought that the apartheid in Israel was worse. Now, Roger Waters being very left-wing and coming up from that mindset, within Marxism, and this is something that I don't agree with, you know, Karl Marx was definitely an anti-Semite, and there is an element of anti-Semitism in communism, and it works like this. They believe that there is all the workers down the bottom, and then they believe there's a privileged elite at the top that are running stuff. And of course, in Marx's time, that privileged elite was said to be the Jews, and we get the development of this trope that then goes into Nazism. And believe me, there is the seed of Marxism in Nazism, where we have this privileged elite, this Jewish elite that is running the world. This is very similar now to the idea of a white supremacy running the world, and I have great difficulty in seeing the difference between those ideologues who are saying and talking about patriarchies and white supremacies, that how have they not taken a certain identity group, lumped everybody in it, regardless of who they actually are individually, and they're then putting these negative ideas onto that identity group, you know. So that's the question here. So in his public life, Roger Waters has criticised Israel, right? But what's happening here, he's not trying to be, they're not trying to silence his view on politics, which just happens to be a rock musician voicing his view on politics. What they're trying to stop is the performance of his concerts. Now, I've looked at the accusations that have gone against him, and one of the accusations is that he has had a pig with the Star of David on it, and that is anti-Semitic, right? So now, us proggers, we could chime in, because no one's chimed in with this. And the idea of the pig goes back to the album Animals. And Animals was an album created and written by Roger Waters that takes Animal Farm by George Orwell, which is a metaphor for Stalinism, which uses the metaphor of a farm. And the groups are in that farm are given to different animals, so certain animals have a certain group, and the pigs in Animal Farm are seen as sort of forceful power. You know, they're like the powerful wing of authority that comes in and forces people to do the agenda of whoever the ruling elite is. And of course, in most communist countries, it's the worst place for having a ruling elite. That is the symbol that the pig represents. A few years back in his concerts, Roger Waters had a pig representing power right? So take that, and on that was stuck all the religious symbols. So he's making an artistic statement here, which is quite obvious. What he's saying is people are controlled, they're controlled by force, and they're controlled through religion by force, right? This is an age-old artistic statement. There is nothing troublesome about it as far as I'm concerned. You can agree with it or not agree with it, right? He received complaints, and some people said, putting the Star of David on a pig could be construed wrongly as being anti-Semitic, so he took it off, right? So the fact that the powers that be, these aren't like just people talking, these are governments, these are politicians. The fact that they're pointing to something like that and saying that that's anti-Semitic, I find really troublesome, because anyone who has an idea of how art works and how it's dumbing down what the art is. Now, what people will say to me in response to that, go, yeah, well, you might be able to understand that meaning, but the man in the street, or the woman in the street, or the person in the street, they won't. They might just see it as being anti-Semitic, and then what will happen? They'll go, oh God, Roger Waters has been anti-Semitic. I'm into this anti-Semitic. I might try it. I might try a bit of anti-Semiticism myself. I can't wait to get home and get, have a go at being anti-Semitic. Seems pretty good. I mean, Roger Waters, he's doing it, and I like Roger Waters, right? That's the thinking behind which to me is absolutely stupid. But worse than that, we have the fact that they have said he is wearing not Gestapo uniforms or Nazi uniforms, but uniforms that are a bit like that. And he's got a symbol on stage, which isn't a swastika, but it's a bit like a swastika. Now, do you know what that symbol is? It's the hammers crossing over. In 1979, when I was a kid, I can remember sat there being frightened by Pink Floyd's video of Another Brick in the Wall, and we all remember the marching hammers. We all knew what that represented, right? It represented power in any form, right? A film came out after that, which in that film used all this imagery, and that film was fine, the video was fine, everything was fine. Back then, people understood that this was a piece of art. People understood that he was criticising these things. He was criticising Nazism, he was criticising authoritarianism, Stalinism, and all these things. And in that collective place, he's criticising Israel for doing what he thinks is the same thing. Now, we can argue about whether that is the case, but the idea that he shouldn't do that, I find really difficult and absolutely frightening. That artists, especially someone who is nearly 80 years old, that is from a really old established band, that in reality is performing his songs that relate back to 40, 50 years ago, right? Where, so these ideas have been in our culture already. So what dumb people have not been able to work that out? There's nothing in the criticism of Roger Waters that actually discusses the artistic meaning behind what Pink Floyd has done. Now, I'm not a fan of The Wall. I don't like The Wall. I've said it on this channel a million times, I'm not a fan of it. I'm not into this stuff at all. I find it just a bit boring to hear, sort of Roger Waters moaning about his sort of position as a rock star and, the mental things and how he wants to, this idea of Pink wanting to take on and become this authoritarian figure that then, turns against it and that story. But some people love it. They love that story. And they want to buy a ticket to go and see a concert and sit it and see a guy who's 79 years old performing these songs before he pegs it, right? This is like the most conservative thing, safest thing in the world that anybody would ever want to do, right? And yet we're living in a world where governments will shut this down, and politicians in the UK are calling for it to be shut down, right? I am not arguing whether he is an anti-Semite or not. You might guess what I think he is from this video, but I'm not going to say it because I'm scared of saying stuff. I'm scared of having a position on this that gets me in too much trouble, right? I don't want to get those people to come screaming at me and calling me names. I don't mind an argument. I have had some lovely arguments on my channel where I have said something political and somebody's chimed in and we've had a bit of an argument. It happened yesterday. It was lovely. At the end, we go, yeah, great. And I said, thanks for the links. Thanks for that. Yeah. And everyone went away happy. I love you all. All right. I love you all that watch my channel. I think you're brilliant. You know, I very rarely get any nasty comments on my channel. There's so much positivity there, and I believe that art is a safe place to discuss these things, which is precisely what Roger Waters is doing. Now, what's interesting here, and I'm going to finish the video with this, is there is a seed within progressive rock that riles people up. Right? There always has been. In the early days, it was seen as really countercultural. It was out there. You know, that bands like Pink Floyd were coming from like a drug scene, a hallucinogenic scene. They were talking about altered states of consciousness. All those types of things were in right at the beginning of progressive rock. It was an alternative group of young people who wanted to tune in, turn on, and drop out. You know, was that the right phrase? Tune in. Turn on, tune in. Anyway, you know what I'm on about. That was extremely countercultural, and that's what progressive rock represented. Once they had created that format, bands like Jethro Tull on Aqualung and Pink Floyd on Dark Side of the Moon, The Wall, were able to use that progressive rock format, that conceptual format, to make statements about culture or make statements about politics, right? I think that the elites in the mid-70s didn't like that. They looked down their noses at, you know, normal people, and they don't think normal people should be dealing with that. They should be listening to disco records, you know, and just jumping around and having a good time. And so Prog got boxed off for being elitist and intellectual, but not of the elite and not of the intellectual class, right? And it was being held down, right? And what we've seen here with this debacle with Roger Waters is that idea of an artist being on stage making political statements, and making political statements that are against the system as we know it. If we take our government, I'm just going to give you one example of that. If we take our government, you know, Keir Starmer at the moment is actually kicking Jews out of his party for being anti-Semitic, right? That's what's going on. And because of that, there actually isn't a challenge against the rights in this country. Now, I'm not left-wing. I'm not particularly right-wing. I would say I go straight down the centre, and on certain things I go a little bit to the left, and on other things I go a little bit to the right. I've just told you my politics, right? But I really believe that we need a strong left wing and we need a strong right wing, and we need a place where we can have these discussions intelligently. And we have to look at art with that level of intelligence, and we have to see what is the statement that is being made, right? When Roger Waters puts up Anne Frank's name in the concert, I don't think he's being anti-Semitic. What he's doing is he's going to that country and putting up the names of victims of people that have been killed in the name of totalitarianism. Now, how is that wrong? Please, can somebody tell me how is that wrong? Right? If he's play acting the role of an authoritarian figure, right, he either believes that that's the case, and there is nothing in Roger Waters' history or the art that he's made that shows any allegiance to that sort of totalitarian. He has criticised it from the start. So why do people think he's not? I tell you why, because they have become dumb and they do not see the art of having that sort of value. This is an absolute awful thing. And I will argue for artists to be able to do creatively, as long as they're not breaking the law, whatever they want. Even when I don't agree with it, I will argue for it, because that is so important to our culture. And the fact that it takes a 79-year-old progressive rock artist to still be able to kick up the arse of this culture, you know, give it such a good kick that it causes this much stuff that you've got governments trying to shut him up. I would say, well, what is he actually saying? And if people can't evaluate it properly because they're too stupid, our culture is in trouble. But they're not stupid, are they? What's happening is that they are kowtowing to a dogma, and that dogma cannot be questioned. That is what's going on. We always need to question every single dogma. And if I've got dogmas, and I know I have, I need to question them. When I come on here and make statements like all modern jazz sounds the same, or anything that whips everybody, jazz is dead, all that's caused a big load of controversy. And of course, you know, I sat here thinking, well, shall I do this video? And I thought, oh, if I put a picture of Roger Waters and then anti-Semite question mark on the thumbnail, people are going to click on it, right? And that's going to do my channel loads of good. So we have this irony that for artists now in the modern culture to be heard and to be seen and people to actually look and listen to what they're saying, you have to court controversy, right? So isn't there a great big game going on here? Right? Has nobody called that out? And aren't I a part of it the same as everybody else? And aren't you a part of it for watching this video right now? But I hope those of you that did click on that I said something at least a little bit reasonable. You might not agree with it and you might agree with it. I might be wrong. Honestly, I really believe that. I might have said some stuff here as just a normal person, just reading newspapers, watching the news, you know, knowing his music. I might have got it wrong and he might be the worst person on the planet. Right? But the only way we can find out is by having a reasonable conversation, not shutting him down. Right? So that's the video. And I hope I made my point. Right? I hope I got my opinion across, because my opinion is really important and I'm going to shout it so that you all know that it's important. Oh, the world we live in today. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you like this, have I ever done a political video before? I don't know whether I have. If you liked me getting a little bit political, then put a like in it. If you want to hear more political stuff, tell me in the comments. If you don't, I'll shut up and I'll go back to my top 10 greatest acoustic intros of classic rock songs. You know, because that was the other idea I had, you know. I mean, obviously Stairway to Heaven wins that, but you'd all click on it, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? You all click on it. Oh, the world we live in today. If you want to support me doing this stuff more, there is a Patreon link down below. Click on the Patreon, become a patron, come over and see all that stuff I've got over there and have a discussion. And we're starting to do some Andy Edwards Patreon hangs at the moment, and I might put some of those on here so you can see how brilliant it is over there. Have I sold that enough for you? It's all about selling, you know. It's all about, we live in a capitalist country. Oh yeah, I forgot to say, animals, see, when you do this, I forget to, animals, right, takes Animal Farm and it inverts it, and he applies that to capitalism, right? I need to say that, just if you wondered what the difference between animals was. Oh, you can't do that at the end of the video, and you can't just throw it in there. If you're proper YouTube, you'd cut that out and you'd put that in, and then you'd make it make sense. But you don't do that, do you? You just come in here and just witter on. Okay, thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next video. Bye.